Well, good morning. Get everything opened up here. All right. Well, it is a privilege and an honor to be able to speak with you this morning. I'm thankful for Brad's invitation in that regard to talk a little bit about Alumni Relations. Now, I'm going to request, if you'll permit me, I want to do about 2 minutes of practical training as we get started this morning. Is a microphone your friend or is it your enemy? The microphone is your friend, and the reason I bring that up, and I especially see it with maybe guys who are getting into ministry. I see it a lot of times with people that have to get up and make announcements and things that aren't used to it, but a lot of times people, they have like a fear of the microphone. Now, if it's handheld, they want to hold it down here, or if it's a lapel, they want to put it way down here. The microphone is there to bless you, especially if you're a guy like me that doesn't have a big voice. Now, some people, they've got these big booming voices and they can fill up a room and they don't need a microphone ever, but a lot of us, we need it. And so just a couple of things in that regard. If you ever go into a church and they don't know you yet and their sound guy wants to actually put the microphone on you, let him do that, because he's going to put that in a place where he knows it's going to perform well. And maybe once they get to know you, then he'll let you put it on yourself. But the worst thing we can do to a sound guy that's sitting back in the back of the room is have the microphone so far away from us that there's no way he can get it loud enough. And so that applies to things like this. I've noticed in song leading, sometimes we'll announce a song and then we'll go over here to lead the song. And we've just completely taken the microphone out of the equation. Now again, when Mark Newton comes into lead singing, he doesn't need that. But most of us, we need that. And when you're leading a song, if you're beating time, that's directing and that's an aspect of leading. But if you're not beating time and you're just singing and nobody can hear you, you're just a song singer at that point and you're really not a song leader. So and I see that happen all the time as well. And so the other thing about it, if you're here and you're too loud, he's going to turn you down. But as long as you're where the microphone's close, he can have control and he should have control. And so I'm not trying to be critical, but I want you to be successful in everything. You know, we sometimes say, well, this is a small group, and it is. But the things that you practice and get used to doing now, those are the things that you'll take with you and practice and do in and day out in your ministry. And so that's a good thing, just a reminder. Okay, as we get started thinking about alumni relations, the first thing I want to say is I'm super excited to see you all as students buying into our theme for the semester. It's all about souls. I remember my freshman year as an undergrad student. I don't know why I still remember. I don't know if we had a theme any of the other years that I was in school, but my freshman year, the theme was busy and happy at DLC. And I guess that was a decent theme. I was always busy, but there were a lot of days I wasn't very happy, especially if it was a week where I had like 3 tests and I wasn't feeling happy in that moment. The theme, it's all about souls, it really works well for a variety of reasons. If you're facing a week where you've got a test in every class and a paper or two due, and you don't know how you're going to get it all done, and you're going through one of those struggles that Barron just prayed about, you can come right back to the theme. Because everything we do, at the end of the day, it's about the idea, why are you preparing for ministry? Well, you want to have a career, but you care about souls. And the other side of that, and where we're going with alumni relations and what we do in advancement, the people that make it possible for all of us to be here, they care about souls. And as long as they know that we care about souls, and as long as they're caring about souls, our university is going to do well. And so it's a really good theme, and I'm excited to see you all buying into it. I haven't gotten to hear all of you who've spoken, but it's a really good thing. Alumni Days. Have you registered yet? Bill has registered. Paul has registered. If you haven't registered, Barron has registered. Okay. If you haven't registered, please do that. It's a really good time. We will have alumni come in. We try to provide something for our alumni, very practical ministry type things. But the reason we need you to register and then actually show up is we buy food and all those sorts of things, and we want to make sure that we have enough food for everybody. And it can be a really good time to get to know some of the guys who've been through here and out in ministry. It's a really good time to make some connections and some things of that nature. So I hope you'll be involved in Alumni Days. Now, who has any idea what university advancement means? Anybody want to weigh in with an idea of what that means? Because that's what we have up over our door.
You improve the university. You do things that make it advance.
Okay, all right, that's good. We are trying to move. We're trying to take steps forward. So that's a good answer. Any others? Anybody else want to weigh in? Years ago, our department would have just been called fundraising. Does that sound kind of cold? It does sound kind of cold. I don't know what year it happened. Somebody came up with the idea of development at one point, and we started calling what we did development. And that kind of had a good ring to it. And at the end of the day, that is also about taking things forward and raising money. And then finally somebody came along and said, well, let's call it advancement. What I like to think in terms of, and what I hope you'll think in terms of when you think about what we're doing out of our office, we're building relationships. We're building relationships on behalf of the university, and the relationships that we build hopefully do help people want to be involved in our work. And so we're building relationships with individual donors. We're building relationships with churches, because so much of what we do, money that comes through here, it comes out of congregations. And then we're also trying to do better at building relationships with alumni, people who have been to school here and are now out in ministry. And I'll just confess to you, that has not always been a strength for us. And it wasn't on purpose, but when the budget's tight, you recruit students, you train students, students graduate and go into ministry, and then you're back there starting that process over. And so we had never really devoted a lot of resources to the idea that, hey, we're starting to have a lot of graduates out there, guys who are in ministry, people who are out doing great things in the kingdom, out in the mission field, and we need to try to make sure that we have good relationships with them. And so under the umbrella of Alumni Relations, what we're really talking about, as a school, we want to have a good relationship with you when you leave here. We want you to love Heritage Christian University. Even if you go on and do work somewhere else at another school, get an advanced degree from another school, we want you to love this place. And there are a number of reasons for that. Part of it is our structure. Anybody have any idea what our overall operating budget total is for this year? Right in that neighborhood. Very good. It's 2.9, so it's right at $3 million. And I'm going to give you just an idea of, have you heard President Jones talk about us being a donation-driven school? He'll say that a lot. Do you understand what that means? Okay, some of you do. Okay, and a lot of that's true. And you may be sitting there thinking, and I'll take you again back to when I was an undergrad student. Carl McKelvey would get up in chapel, and it felt like he said this every day, and he didn't say it every day, but he'd get up and he'd say to us, he'd say, now don't think the money your parents are spending for you to be here is making your education possible. And I was sitting there, you know, I'm a preacher's kid, and we didn't have a lot of money, and I knew my mom and dad were bending over 3 different ways to try to make sure I could go to that school and without having to borrow a ton of money. And so it stretched us. And so when he starts saying, well, don't think that what they're doing is making this possible, that doesn't, it's like, well, what does that really mean? How can that be possible? But it's really true. And it's really true, too, at a place like this. Tuition comprises about 20% of our operating budget. And so that $3 million budget, tuition's about 20% of that. And that means for every dollar of tuition that comes in, we've got to go find 4 in donations. And actually, it's actually a little higher than that, because even some of the tuition, anybody getting a scholarship? Well, we have to raise the scholarship money that makes the tuition. We have to raise that money to make that scholarship possible. So it's actually a little bit more than that. So then when you start seeing, well, what's left of that money? About 40% of our budget is from individuals who like what we do. About 20% of our budget comes in from churches who support what we do. 10% of our budget is covered by our endowment. Anybody understand the concept of an endowment? Anybody want to? Okay, usually it's set up when somebody passes away. Not always, but often. Anything else about endowments and how they work? Because this will be important to you later on. Because you may be out serving in a church and you may have a member approach you, because when somebody needs to know something, they always come to the preacher and you're expected to know something about everything, right, Bill? The way an endowment works is this. A person donates, say, $100,000. And the $100,000 is never touched. It's endowed and it's invested. And so then our board of directors has a policy set up whereby when that money is invested, we draw a certain percentage of that, but it's a small percentage, and it's a percentage such that the endowment in a year where the economy does what it's supposed to do, the endowment actually grows because there's always going to be inflation. So that $100,000 10 years from now should be worth enough more that we still get the same value in drawing out of that we would get from it today. And so an endowment is people who care about this place. It often comes through a will where somebody passes away, but they leave money and it's endowed, and we get income from that. So about 10% of our operating budget is from endowments. About 10% of our annual budget is covered by our board of directors. Boards of directors are not just guys who sit on high and make decisions. Boards of directors are guys who are on the board because they care about souls and they're passionate about what we do and they love this school, and they don't just love it, they don't just say I love it, they actually sacrifice financially to help the school move forward. And so that gives you just a little bit of snapshot of where our money comes from. And so when we talk about being a donation school, that's what President Jones means. Yes, there's tuition, and yes, you're spending money, and yes, you need more money, but for all that you're doing, we're also going out and raising a lot of money so that we can be here to get you ready for ministry. So another way to say it, after tuition is paid, for every business day, there are 365 days in a year, about 240 business days in a year. For every business day of the year, we've got to go raise about $9,700 to keep the doors open and to keep the lights on and to keep things moving forward. And so if you're ever frustrated that we haven't improved something yet, or something's not as nice as you want it to be just yet, it's not that we don't want to. Sometimes we're just not where we can do that yet. But we always want to be moving forward. So when you graduate, well, let me ask this. How did you all, anybody want to tell me how they first heard or first started thinking about coming here? Did you see us on a television ad? Probably not. Did somebody just get up in your church and talk about Heritage Christian? Did anybody, when you said, I'm interested in ministry, was there anybody that came to you and said, well, if you're interested in ministry, you ought to think about Heritage? Did that happen for anybody? See, that happens over and over and over. Once you're out there as a graduate, what we want you to do is to look back and see the value here. And when guys come to you, and if you're the preacher in a congregation, if a young guy's thinking about preaching, he's going to come to you and he's going to say, well, what are my options? What should I think about? And not every student, we might not be the best fit for every student, but what we need you to do is say, well, as you look at your options, you ought to look at Heritage. Preachers can do one of two things. What's a gatekeeper? If you hear that term, what would that conjure up in your mind?
Someone who controls who comes in and out.
Okay. In the movies, if it's a movie with like a club scene and you got a lineup of people outside with the velvet rope and you got that guy at the door, he's deciding who's in and who's out, right? That's kind of what a gatekeeper is. Preachers can function in that role, especially if it's a small congregation. Some churches, the the elders really lean on the preachers because the elders don't know the brotherhood, they don't know who's who, and so that a lot of times the elders will come and say, well, do you know anything about this school? Or do you know anything about this guy? Or do you know anything about this mission work? And so they're going to come and ask you questions. And you can be the kind of guy who's a gatekeeper where you say, we don't need those people in here. The other thing you can be, though, is a door opener. And what we hope you'll be for the school is a door opener where, you know, we can come in and talk about what we do so that that little old lady can go talk to her grandson about Heritage Christian University. You may not have met her grandson. You may never know her grandson. He lives in another state. But by us coming in and talking about what we're doing to train preachers, then that little old grandma, she goes and she talks to her grandson or her 40-year-old grandson who's changing careers and can say, man, you ought to talk to Heritage. They've got this legacy scholarship. By being a door opener, you can really help us. Now, in most schools, what does the school want their alumni to do with their checkbook? Yeah, you went to school with us, and when you get out there and you make a ton of money, a big pile of money that you got to sit on, we want you to write a check and give back. Well, we get it. What are you all going into? Now, this needs to be said. Can you make a good living as a minister? You absolutely can. Now, I understand it's not the money thing's not the reason you get into ministry, but if you set your goals and you have a plan and you decide you want to do well, you can make a really, really good living as a minister. And I hope you'll be charitable. I would love to see you help us. I would love to see you help other folks. I hope you do well, and I hope you're charitable. But we get it. You're going into ministry. And you may be going to the mission field. You may be going into a work where you've got to go raise part of your salary. So we're not going to be beating you down saying, please write us a check. But you can be instrumental in getting us to the people who can help us financially. Because if you're getting a legacy scholarship now, you're getting that scholarship because there's somebody who cares enough about preacher training to write a check to say, man, I want a student to have a scholarship. And you may be able to help us identify some people in the churches where you serve. As they know about us, they'll want to be involved so that that next generation of students can be helped just like you all have been. And so we have not, as I said, we haven't done as well as we want to do with Alumni Relations. That's one of the reasons that Alumni Days was started. It's getting close to being 10 years ago, I guess. We started that as to provide a no-cost weekend where our people could come back and hang out with each other, be encouraged by some good lessons, eat some good food that they didn't have to pay for. You know, we want our alumni to be engaged with the school, but I also understand ministry's busy. It's easy to get distracted. It's easy to have a lot of things going on. But that's when we think of Alumni Relations. We just want you to keep a connection with the school when you're done. Because you can be instrumental in helping that next generation of preachers be able to come to a place like this where they can get an education and do that where they're not going to come out hopefully saddled by a pile of debt that will not allow them to go out and do what they need to do, and to be getting a premium education, an education that has you prepared both academically and practically. You know, we emphasize, how do you do hands-on ministry? I mean, that's part of who we are. That's our DNA. That's what we're about. And so you're in a good place. And so if you appreciate that, I hope you'll think about that when you're out. The other thing we can help you do, or hopefully, if you're in a church and you're starting to think about finding your next opportunity, you know, we hope you'll contact us and let us be involved in keeping our eyes open. You know, that's another area we serve. Anybody know what the most heavily traveled part of our website is? What? Yes. Unless it's changed just in the last little bit. Every time we look at the traffic on the website, that section about, you know, churches looking for preachers, that's always the most heavily traveled part of the website. And so we're always happy to serve that way. That's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Again, register for Alumni Days. Any questions about what we're doing? Any questions about alumni relations in general? And if you don't have them now, always feel free to stop in and ask. All right. I thank you for your time.